Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's weekly wrap. Mirko, how are you, my friend? How are you doing?
Going well, yeah, going well. My usual Friday happiness end of the week. I like that. What about you, mate?
I was going to say, man, I'm actually going really, really well, mate. It's been a cracking day and a busy day too, which has been nice. But I am looking forward to the weekend, mate. It's funny how these weeks just keep on just zapping way through, and all of a sudden it's Friday, and you kind of go, okay, I need that. Looking forward to a weekend. I'm just not much to do, so that'll be fun.
TGIF. Thanks God. Thank God it's Friday. Is that the one?
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Now it's been a bit of an up week on the markets, mate. You want to give us a bit of a summary?
Yeah, it's been actually pretty positive on markets, and so both in Australia and the US, which has been good. Had some reporting which we'll talk about in Australia, but ASX be up nearly 1%. I think up 0.7, zero point 0.8 at this stage of the day on the Friday. The Dow was up 1.8. Nasdaq was up nearly 2% for the week so far. So it's been sort of positive news on that front. A bit of data coming in from the US overnight regarding inflation and still some concerns about inflation there. So I think Jerome Powell sticking to his guns with that narrative, and therefore there's question marks about rate cuts and whether they will happen. But there's people putting their hands up to replace him come next year, and with serious cutting mandates. So if it doesn't happen soon over there, I'm sure it's going to happen once there's a change made at the top there. That's for sure.
But that would present some risk, I guess. Like if I understand you wanting to cut interest rates, but sometimes what we want and what we can have are two different things. It feels like in the US that what we need is being ignored versus what we want. Is that a fair assessment?
That sounds a bit like most people today, mate. They just complete ignorance when it comes to the difference between need and wants, yeah. And but
Yeah, no.
unfortunately, we're actually living through this, and you're 100% right. And rather than rather than talk about why we need to do things and what the logical steps are and the like, we're actually just making outrageous statements about this is what we should be doing with no regard to the way decisions actually need to be made with structure and
Mm.
basis and all that sort of stuff. So that's always a concern.
No, absolutely. And this week we saw here in Australia, we saw rates come down in Australia actually. So I think last month or the last time they got together, we were hoping that rates would come down, and they decided to hold firm. But on this particular occasion, they dropped them by 0.25. A surprise, Mirko, or in line with expectation?
I think in line with expectation, the positive outcome for me is that it does seem to be a measured move. Like of
Mm.
course everyone that wasn't happy with the decision a month ago is now saying too late to the party. But I like the way that the RBA is actually, thinking their way through these things and going through the process. So I don't see anything wrong with what's actually transpired there.
Yeah, look, and thinking about that, you can't help feel like the adults are in control and in the room in that sense. And this is not to be disrespectful to Jerome Powell, because I think he's doing a cracking job in the United States. But under extraordinary duress, I would argue.
Few small distractions, you reckon, Luke, for Jerome Power.
Just a tad, mate. Just a tad. Now, we don't normally speak directly on stock, but I guess I just wanted to raise the events of two stocks in particular. And CBA on one hand and Westpac on the other side. We've seen CBA this week; they're down a further 5.69, and that's now down 13% from their recent highs. That's a
Yeah.
fair drop. I think their recent high was 192, and they're currently trading at about 166, 167. And we've seen Westpac on the other side go up 8.61. So it's funny how in the banking sector, are we seeing a rotation in banking stocks perhaps?
Yeah, I think people have been questioning certain valuations for a while and how they've actually gone and perhaps the market is doing a bit of a rotation and saying if we're going to punish a stock, let's punish the one where there's most question around valuation versus the market as a broad. And I think that's what we've actually seen to date, in truth. And yeah, CBA
Yeah.
off, but I would, as a CBA shareholder, I wouldn't be complaining too much. I think you're still up 23% for the last 12 months. All right. So yes, you've given back 13%, but not bad. Not bad. In the 20s. You'll take that.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't be complaining, my friend. I definitely wouldn't be complaining. Now, this week, Mirko, or next week, sorry, the productivity roundtable is actually going to take place in Canberra. And, let's break out the confetti. It's exciting times, I dare say, when 23 of the smartest people in theory are getting around a table and they're going to talk all things productivity, tax, where the nation is headed, and so on. And we've seen some really cool ideas and some really off-the-cuff ideas. And I guess just to throw it out there, the concept of cutting red tape, the business councils of Australia are saying, hang on a sec, we need to do something here to fix up what is clearly a problem, the bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy. And just by way of example, today, like in Victoria, a cafe requires 36 separate licenses to actually make a latte, which is kind of bizarre when you kind of think of what you've got to go through. And then if we think about the Gold Coast plumber who might have to go across the border into New South Wales to fix a leaky tap, he's got to pay a small fortune in terms of permits to be able to go fix that same tap in New South Wales, whereas he doesn't have to do the same thing in Queensland, which just seems absolutely crazy. So we've got those sorts of things. There's also a lot of arguments around, do we increase the GST rate? Do we introduce a cash flow tax? But Allegra Spending today, the Teal Independent for Wentworth, she came out with something which was pretty interesting on the basis of it all, where she was saying negative gearing is probably something we should look to stop. And what she's doing is saying we need to separate investment income and investment earnings from work earnings and tax them differently. So what she's saying is that on the investment side, negative gearing and stuff like that, you'd be able to claim when you sell the property, not as a means to reduce your salary during the course of the year. I remember Bill Shorten coming up with a similar type arrangement back in 2019, and I don't want to remind him what happened, but he got whacked. And Allegra Spender is the member for Wentworth, which I would argue and say is probably the highest number of constituents that could have a negative geared property. Bit brave, don't you think?
I reckon there would have been a whole heap of Wentworth constituents that fell off their chairs when they heard that one and choked on their Wheaties. But look, very brave to go out and tackle negative gearing, particularly as we know that Australians have that love affair with property and not just principal residence. I would say one thing on the Productivity Commission. We hope that this is not just a talk fest, and rather than they can walk away from this and say we have a mandate and we're going to implement X, Y, and Z because we believe it's actually good for productivity. I kind of feel that some of the things that get raised, we've been talking about for the last 10 years, Luke, the last 20 years, unfortunately, and still no resolutions, no solutions, which is disappointing. So let's hope there's a bit of action that actually comes out of this productivity roundtable.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because the coalition has threatened to storm out of the productivity discussions on the basis if any taxes are actually raised. So if anyone dares raise a tax, they're going to storm out and they're not involved in this whole process. And yeah, I get it. The opposition wants to be different. I get the opposition needs to be heard in some way or form because they're currently irrelevant. So I can understand it. But the nation itself, there's a structural deficit. Putting our heads in the sand is what got us into this mess in the first place. To simply just have a talk fest and nothing to come out of it seems to be a waste of time in my view. So here to what you just said. Now, in some global news, President Trump, and we're not going to be critical of President Trump this week because he's actually doing a lot of stuff for peace at this moment in time. And there's one thing that Trump is desperately trying to do. He's trying to eye the Nobel Peace Prize. And I guess from that point of view, I'm just trying to fathom Donald Trump, Nobel Peace Prize, and just trying to put that into perspective. But at the moment, we know on the weekend, tomorrow morning, he'll be meeting with Vladimir Putin with an idea of trying to come up with a resolution between the Russian and Ukraine conflict. We know that he's mediated events in Thailand, Cambodia, Pakistan, India, Rwanda, and across Africa from that point of view. And he even signed off a peace deal this week, or last week, I think, for Azerbaijan and Armenia. I guess from my point of view, and love him, loathe him, whatever your view is on that thing, you got to give him a crack. You know, he's doing his bit and he's trying to get things done. As to whether or not he achieves anything, I'm not sure. But from your view, if he was to sign off on the Ukraine-Russia thing, and assuming it was a fair result for the Ukrainians, given that they were invaded initially, does he deserve a Nobel Peace Prize, Mick?
No, no. If he wants a Nobel Peace Prize, he can print himself one, go to the engravers, and get himself a trophy. But Hey, here's a fun fact for you. The narrowest gap between Russia and where they're actually meeting mainland Alaska there is actually about 90, 100 kilometers. That's how close the
Yeah.
US actually is in that case to Russia. So uh, definitely made it convenient for President Putin to not have to travel too far for this meeting. I think I heard President Trump saying that he'll know in the first 3 or 4 minutes whether Putin's in a good mood and whether we're going to actually get some solutions. At the end of the day, there's still a party missing at that meeting. We all know that's the case. So I don't know how you actually go about making decisions there.
Yeah, look, I do hope for the people of Ukraine that they are not just becoming pawns in this whole process, because the reality is they did nothing wrong, and any sort of way to sugarcoat this to say that they were the cause or whatever. And if you do remember back in February with the Zelensky ambush and all that kind of stuff, I think we were all gobsmacked in terms of what happened on that particular day. You'd like to think that cool heads have prevailed since then, and hopefully Donald Trump has spoken to his European counterparts, and hopefully he's come up with something. In saying that, I don't see Putin rolling over Mirko. He doesn't win in this space. So either Putin gets his demands or he doesn't live. I don't see which way this one goes, but I'm not sure. Interestingly enough, if he is on Alaskan territory, which is American territory, let's not forget that, he could technically be arrested.
Oh, there's an idea. Yeah, that would give you points towards the Nobel Peace Prize. There's a
well,
concept.
We could send him to El Salvador because we're not keeping him in an American prison, so we could do all types of things. So who knows?
I dare to think what would be the outcome.
Oh, look, yeah, I do wonder, man. I do wonder. But look, I think for mine, if Trump can organise this and let's say he is successful, let's say he does engineer some sort of peace pact between Ukraine and Russia and the bloodshed does stop, and hopefully he can do the same in the Gaza from that end. If it means stroking his ego and giving him a Nobel Peace Prize and avoiding World War III, let him have it. That's my view. I'm prepared to concede on that basis.
Yeah,
now,
all right.
Just
you can go to the awards ceremony as the number. You get one ticket. Maybe you jag the ticket for being the supporter.
So you're telling me I'm the +1. Good on you, buddy.
You're the +1, mate.
No, fair enough too. Now, I want to talk about superannuation inequality or inequity. And this is a conversation that won't go away. It keeps on appearing in articles. It keeps on appearing in newspapers, and there's people dropping it about. It's always on podcasts and so on. And we work in the space of super, and we work in it every day. And we know that any time the concept of reform in superannuation is mentioned, people get automatically their back up and say, no, I don't want any changes from that end. And I can understand that because, look, the rules have been in place. People have used those rules to their advantage. They haven't done anything wrong from that point of view, and now they feel like they're being punished from that end. But that said, there is some data that is doing the rounds that I just want to raise. Now, as of June 2018, so this is a few years back, but whatever from that end, so this number has changed dramatically. But there was more than 11,000 people at that time who had balances over $5 million, okay? And on those balances, the annual tax concessions on the earnings were somewhere around $70,000 per year. Okay. Now, when you divide that on a weekly basis, it ends up being $1,346 of tax concessions that the Australian taxpayer is paying that superannuant the benefit of from that point of view in a country where the minimum wage is $948 per week before tax. So that inequity is being pushed and exposed and advertised and promoted, and it is causing a lot of angst between the generations, particularly the younger generations who are saying, well, hang on a sec, my taxes are now funding these concessions. I don't know about you, but the fact that these articles keep on appearing, a bit like the inheritance tax that keeps on appearing, where there's smoke, there usually is fire. Is this the prelude for change, do you think?
Yeah, look, it's actually quite frustrating and annoying that you see all of these articles coming out, and you know, look, I'm not going to defend anybody that's managing to squirrel away money into superannuation, $5 billion, and reap the tax benefits of that. But at the end of the day, like you said in your opening, no laws have actually been broken. They've actually just used the rules to their advantage, and they've obviously been pretty shrewd as investors to be able to end up with that sort of money in the account. And you know, at the end of the day, they're just simply following the rules on that front. But what does amaze me is I think there's 25 million superannuitants, if that's actually a word, people that hold superannuation in this country, and somehow we always manage to talk about I don't know, 10,000 of them, 11,000 of them, yeah, and versus the big broader picture in that respect. I do believe that superannuation will be targeted at some point in time, because you know the numbers simply lend themselves to what is the low hanging fruit for the government to sort of try and generate some revenue and everything. But at the end of the day, you need to be careful what you wish for, because you know, even with the tweaks that they've been talking about with the Division 296, the $3 million and all that, all of a sudden you've got this whole explosion of alternative advice around, well, is superannuation the vehicle for the bulk of your wealth anymore? And if you don't get that right, there can be some serious unintended consequences down the track. And you know, and it may actually be that people are even more reliant on the government in 10, 20 years' time that your mathematics says they are today. And what we, you know, the story we should be running with is encouraging people to be self-funded down the track, because that's the big number that we know we have an issue with. There's not enough taxpayers coming through the system to fund that, but no one seems to be talking about that. Everyone's talking about these big fat cats that you know, 10,000 funds that are getting tax concessions.
Yeah, and look, there is no question, Mirka, that at this moment in time, when you think about the way the system works and so on, the system has been designed, and it was designed in a way to encourage people to save. So that worked, tick. Some of the rules that then came out probably made it, or made the advantages for people who had the capacity to save more. More tax advantages were provided to them than perhaps to the lower side of things. And so that, you know, I think there is cause for a review. There is no question about that. And there is a cause for a reset of sorts. But I think we've just got to be very careful with the language that we're using at this particular moment in time, because I do agree with you. I think this whole notion of we tend to focus on what is a small cohort. The majority of people don't get impacted by these sorts of reforms. But in saying that, I think what we need to do is have a fair playing field at this moment in time, where we kind of turn around and go, well, okay, maybe the way we tax capital and maybe the way we tax income are two different things. And we're just going to have a broader discussion. And hopefully the Productivity Commission actually has a discussion around this basis. The fact is they're only meeting for 3 days, so I don't think they're going to resolve these problems. These problems have been going around for a long time yet. So watch this space, my friend. Now, one thing I wanted to raise is crypto. And I wanted to raise this, and we're not, you and I, we kind of, we have our own views of crypto and all that kind of stuff, but it's no longer the Wild West by definition, Mirko. And what I mean by that is today, based upon research, 12% of Australians now own some form of crypto. Now, it's either, you know, in terms of they own it, so it's either indirect coins or through exchanges or whatever they might be doing from that end. And the thing that's interesting about the 12% that do, that's actually equal to the amount of ETFs. And it's actually ahead of what most Australians have in global equities, which I find extraordinary from that point of view. The other thing that's also happening is that big institutional players are now starting to move into it. So we've seen AMP Super take a small position in crypto as well, which is now, in effect, legitimizing that thing. Now, Bitcoin, we all know, is the headline act. and at the moment it's currently worth $118,000 US per coin, with Global X predicting that it's going to hit 200,000 by the end of the year, which is an extraordinary prediction to be making. Is this hype? Is this crazy? Is this madness? Or is this just a sign of the times in terms of crypto is no longer something that we need to be ignoring, but it's now something that's very much in the mainframe and we should be incorporating as part of our portfolios longer term?
Look, without sort of telling people that they should have it as part of their portfolios, always go back to is your asset position well diversified? Is are you thinking about the short, the medium, the long term investments that you hold? Is cryptocurrency an asset class? I would argue today no, and that's probably more because I come from a belief of traditional sort of asset classes. Is it an investment worthy of having? I reckon if you understood it and you understood what you were investing in, perhaps it's something that you could, hold from that point of view. I'd love to know, and I'm gonna pull a finger my finger out here with a stat of the 12% of Australians that own crypto. I reckon 90% have no idea what they actually own. Right? They actually have zero clues about what it is that they're actually holding. And a lot of that would be a complete FOMO trade. The fear of missing out. I've got to get on board and do that. You know what? It may go to $200,000, but I'm certainly not going to have my entire portfolio contingent on the success of any form of cryptocurrency or meme coin for that matter.
Yeah, look, it's hard to disagree with you on that point. I think the other point that we've got to remember too, crypto, as good as it is, or potentially as good as it can be from that point of view, it's very much unregulated still. So the rules and the parameters around this thing aren't very clear. Monies can go missing, crime, and all those sorts of things that play around this sort of space. I think it's something that needs a global perspective first and foremost, in terms of some very clear laneways in terms of what it can do and what it can't do from that end. In saying that, the minute you start to impose the laneways is the minute it stops being attractive. Because one of the advantages of not having the laneways is it can do all these weird and wonderful things. So that's probably the interesting thing. But I'm with you on your points around understanding crypto. I speak to a lot of people, I've got a lot of friends as well who will always mention crypto assets and so on. And when I actually ask them, say, what are you buying? Or give me the substance of what you've actually bought, there's really nothing there in terms of the substance that they've bought. It's what they've heard or what they've read from that point of view. They understand it's a blockchain, so they understand the mechanics behind it, or getting rid of the middleman, or getting rid of government, as they would say, or getting rid of the banks. And you kind of go, well, that's kind of cool, but what are you actually buying? What's the asset holding? What's the value behind it? So that's an interesting thought there, I guess, from that end. Now, mate, we're coming to the weekend. I'm having a look here. It's 12 degrees, I think, this weekend, and 12 degrees tomorrow. 12 degrees tomorrow and 12 degrees on Sunday. It looks like it's going to be a terrible weekend. Not much to do outside, I dare say.
Damn, an excuse not to do any gardening. Tick. I'm in. Sign me up. I would have loved to have gone and got hold of those trees and sorted the weeds out and stuff, but I just couldn't get out there. It was too wet, Luke. I've already got that excuse down pat. I went with a nice glass of wine instead.
Yeah, look, I'm with you on that one, mate. I eyed a bottle. I saw the weather forecast for the weekend, and I eyed a bottle at home. And I thought, oh yeah, that might have to be open and just aired a little bit, so we could actually enjoy that one. I think on the Saturday. And then if Sunday's not much better, we might just have to find another one just to join that one as well with a bit of luck. So
it'd be such a shame to have a lazy weekend.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mind you, we have had a cracking week. The weather has been superb, so let's not complain about that one. Let's not complain, mate. Are you doing anything special this weekend, or just nice and easy?
Very much relaxed this weekend. You?
Yeah, mate. Pretty much the same, mate. Pretty much the same. It's been a busy few weeks at work, mate. So I do need a weekend where we just calm down and keep it nice and simple. So, mate,
who's your footy team? Who's your footy team playing?
I think we're playing St Kilda tonight, mate. Yeah, not really that excited. However, the Premier League does start this weekend, and Liverpool's back defending its title, and we kick off I think tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. So and that's in the morning too. That's a shocking time.
No, that's probably the only one I can be up for. I can't do late nights anymore, but I can get up early, so I'll probably watch that. There you go. There's one thing I'll be doing tomorrow morning. Thanks for the reminder too.
No worries, mate. Consider it done. Consider it done. All right. Well, to you and to all our wonderful clients out there and to our wonderful people here at Innate Wealth, thank you very much. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Wishing you all the very best. Stay warm. Enjoy that glass of wine, and we'll chat soon and see you next week. Cheers,
See you
guys.
guys. Bye.